We are sharing our screen. Hopefully you can see our Your Move logo. All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Ali Lazowski. I'm with the Alamo Area MPO. I'm the Transportation Planning Program Manager. I'm very happy to be with y'all tonight. And I've received confirmation from our staff that we are looking good on Facebook Live too. So whether you're here with us through the Your Move webpage or on Facebook Live, thank you so much for joining us. Okay. Well, tonight's agenda is going to begin with a background on the Alamo Area MPO, and then we're going to move into our TIP and MTP overview, which is an overview of the two transportation plans that the Alamo Area MPO is in the process of updating. We'll then take you through Your Move, which is the public input process we've put together to engage your input and help us produce better plans. We'll go through the next steps, and then we're looking forward to a Q&A with you guys. Please feel free to comment throughout the presentation on Facebook Live if that's where you're watching from. And we have staff monitoring that. If there's any clarifying questions, you can get an answer. You'll probably get an answer from them. But anything that we can address live for everybody watching, we'll be doing that here at the end of the program. If you're watching us through Webex, you can also use the chat box feature, and we'll be monitoring questions through there as well. So please feel comfortable knowing that your questions will hopefully be answered tonight. If not tonight, and we need additional time to research answers, we will be getting those to you shortly. But we're here to make sure that we are getting your input, and we are thanking you for your time tonight. I do want to mention that if you would like to view any information in Spanish or have particular questions in Spanish, our team member Amber Perez's contact information is there on the screen in the blue box. All right, the first question you might be asking, if you are not familiar with us, is who are we, the Alamo Area MPO? The Alamo Area MPO, or AAMPO, is one of over 400 MPOs across the nation. And MPOs are actually federally mandated agencies that guide regional transportation planning in a metropolitan area, ours being the greater San Antonio area with the surrounding suburban and neighboring cities. One of the more important things that MPOs get to do for their region is allocate federal transportation dollars to projects in their area. We also administer lots of other programs intended to improve mobility, air quality, and safety. And we are guided by the Transportation Policy Board, made up of elected and appointed officials. So AAMPO plans to keep you moving. The Alamo Area MPO study area includes Bexar County, where we find the city of San Antonio and many of our suburban cities, as well as Comal and Guadalupe and a portion of Campbell County. So this region has over 2 million residents who travel on 10,000 vehicle lane miles, which is essentially the lanes of pavement that cars, trucks, buses are moving along. And these 2 million residents are traveling 50 million miles every day, which is just an astounding number. And every time I read it, it just kind of knocks me off my feet. Now, we understand that transportation matters for many reasons. You probably have a personal reason that transportation matters to you, and that may have brought you here today to this meeting. It might be that how it connects you to work, to childcare, to school. It might be that you're passionate about how transportation impacts the environment. It might be about freight and good movements, because transportation is integral to delivering packages to your doorstep And we've seen a lot of that during the last year, doing so much of our ordering online. And it's also integral to getting groceries to HEB and to any other place that you find yourself shopping. Transportation also matters because of safety. It's one of the most impactful things that we do every day, getting into a car, walking down the sidewalk, however it is that we're moving somewhere, and relying on that transportation system to get us there safely. And transportation is also impacted by technology, which is very exciting. Right now, it's one of the most exciting times in transportation to think about new up-and-coming ways that we might see drones used to get us shipments. We might see Hyperloop taking us longer distance places around the state or states. Transportation also matters to your pocketbook. It can cost you money, or it might save you money depending on the mode that you're able or need to choose. This is a slide that talks about the core planning processes of any MPO. So here at AAMPO, one of the 3 C's that we practice is cooperative planning. And that means that no single agency has full responsibility of the entire transportation system. If you are somebody who lives in the city of New Braunfels, you know that that city is maintaining and it has ownership of many of those surface streets that you use. The I-35 right there, an integral part of your transportation network, is owned and operated by TxDOT. So the MPO is here to ensure that no matter how you are getting around, the different players who are providing that transportation system are getting together around the table at least monthly through our policy board to talk about plans and making that transportation smooth and efficient for us to move on. Transportation planning also should be comprehensive. So here at the Alamo Area MPO, we are looking at all transportation modes, as well as incorporating the planning priorities, the local land use, economic development goals of our planning partners. And transportation planning is also continuous, meaning that we are right now in the midst of an update of our short range and our long range transportation plans. Every 2 years, we're updating that short range plan, and every 4 years, we're updating that long range plan, because priorities of the community change. New people move to the San Antonio area, some people move out. And so you see a turnover in the different things that people hold highly in regard, and you also see new technologies that might be able to change the way that you used to do work.
No, because we're going to...
Hold on a moment. I hear some background noise.
Okay.
We're going to do a quick move.
Well, it's a first read
They
today.
can still accept the 15 until what date? Until the attorneys filed the dismissal.
All right, there we go. So it sounds like some very exciting stuff going on in the background of that attendee. Okay, so that concludes the overview of a 3C planning process that every MPO is actually has guidelines to follow for their metropolitan area. This is a list of our policy board members. These are people who represent you guys through city councils, through county commissioners' courts, through the staff leading departments, and the state Department of Transportation, as well as via Metropolitan Transit, and many of the smaller cities, suburban cities that are here in the Alamo Area MPO study area. And we thank each of these people for the time that they spend preparing for meetings, because they are not people who, study to be transportation planners, but they're there to serve and work together toward a common goal for transportation planning in this region. So why am I here tonight asking you to come listen to me? Well, the Alamo Area MPO right now is in the midst of updating our long-range plan. The alphabet soup name for that is our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP. And that long-range plan forecasts transportation needs out to the next 25 years, as well as outlines projects that could be funded within that time frame. I do have a question in the chat about closed captioning. I'm going to take a brief pause to see if I can get that set up. Okay, I can see closed captioning on my screen now. Can I get any affirmatives? Is anybody else seeing clear closed captioning? I'm not sure if this is something that we do individually, but for the attendee JH, you are watching through Webex. So if you're able to go to the top of your screen and look for the speech bubble with 2 C's for closed captioning, that is where I was able to turn on mine. And I do want to say that following the meeting, we will have the recording as well as the script up on the Your Move page. So we'll make sure that if any of this is, if you need to rehear or read any of this, that there'll be that opportunity. Thanks for bringing up that question. And I didn't mean to pause in the middle of the information, but that was a good question. I wanted to help take care of that. So that long-range plan that we're in the middle or in the process of developing right now uses current trends in population, jobs, household size, and income, as well as mode choice and other data to inform the forecasts about where infrastructure should be built to meet long-term transportation needs. And the MTP is here to help guide project selection. The vision and goals that are outlined in the MTP guide decisions about which transportation projects to fund and to implement that are in the short-range plan. And as I mentioned, we update that long-range plan every 4 years. That brings us to our short-range transportation plan. It is our transportation improvement program, which we staff call TIP. The TIP is a 4-year list of transportation projects approved for funding, and these have a set budget. So projects that are listed in the TIP actually have dollars for construction tied to them. As an example, you might have a project that has some federal dollars allocated to it by the MPO, and that is matched by a city's bond program. So these are projects that are that have that money to be built over the next 4 to 6 years. A TIP is developed cooperatively. We get all those partner agencies together in order to put together this project list every 2 years. The project call that we're talking about and that brings us here today is actually a competitive process to add local projects to the TIP. And that's because there is often or always more demand for the federal transportation dollars in a local area than we have the dollars to award. A TIP is led by the long-range plan. The project selection that we're doing today is guided by the vision and values that are established in that MCP, among other project selection criteria. So what projects do you find in the TIP and the MTP? There's a plethora and a variety of projects. Not everything has to be construction oriented. The MPO can fund programs such as TxDOT's HERO program. And if I could see everybody at this point, I'd raise your hand to see if you've seen one of these HEROs on the highway as you've gone by. I've definitely noticed them, and this is a really positive program in the area to help stranded drivers off of a highway, whether they've blown a tire or run out of gas, so that there's not that obstacle and a fast-moving highway that could potentially create a dangerous crash. That TxDOT HERO program began funding last year. A TIP and an MCP also can have bike lanes. They can have improvements to our surface streets, such as the roundabout at San Pedro and Navarro in downtown San Antonio. It also has transit improvements. This Brooks Transit Center provides primo service along Southwest Military. And it can even fund projects like the UTSA's mobile bike repair shop. This is a unique project that's kind of new to the area for our TIP, but as an area that is trying to get back into our air quality attainment, we received funds to help with air quality improvement, and this was a project that received some of those funds. And TIPs and MCPs definitely have these large expansions of roadways, like the expansion of I-10 that includes the region's first HOV or high occupant vehicle lanes. Somebody who carpools or rides a bus can use those HOV lanes to get through traffic, hopefully a little bit quicker. And that opens up additional space along the other roadway lanes for people who are using their own cars. I want to show you this map. There's a few maps in the presentation today, but this is one that shows the projects that are already in our current plans. So right now, the plan that we are working through is Mobility 2045, and you see projects here that are along many roadways in the area. If you visit our homepage, alamoareampO.org, then you can find this IMAP on that page and check out the years that these projects are estimated to begin construction, how many dollars are allocated to them, and other details. So what projects were submitted during the project call that we have had this year? So when we kicked off a project call last October that ended on April 1st of this year, we got 68 projects from all over the study area totaling over $670 million. This map shows each of the projects that were submitted. In red, you see projects that are added capacity. In dark blue, you see projects that are not going to change the number of lanes in a road, but offer operational improvements. In light blue or turquoise, you see bicycle and pedestrian standalone improvements. In gray, you see a couple of transit projects proposed. And in black, you see, I think, just one CMAQ or congestion mitigation and air quality improvement project, but there were some additional CMAQ projects that were not mappable, meaning they're programmatic. Now we're going to go through this in a little more detail, but I won't go through each of the 68 projects, so don't worry about your time tonight. Those added capacity projects are ones that add new lanes or roads. And these projects can also add or improve bicycle and pedestrian facilities in conjunction with the addition of new lanes and roads. Those dark blue projects that were operational are projects that improve multimodal operations of the roadway without adding new lanes for vehicles. The bicycle and pedestrian projects are those that are constructing, reconstructing, or upgrading bicycle and pedestrian facilities and concentrated on those active transportation modes. The transit projects are studies that improve public transportation. And again, that funny word, CMAQ, stands for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program projects that will reduce transportation-related emissions in Bexar County, which is the county that is deemed out of attainment for ozone, the pollution, which is a pollutant and detriment to public health. I want to share with you a little bit about how project types were scored by technical work group committees. The added capacity projects were scored their ability to address congestion, both current and future forecasted for congestion, as well as how long people spend in congestion by hours over the year, as well as reliability of travel time for both drivers in our personal vehicles and for freight drivers. Added capacity projects were also scored based on their safety and the rate of severe crashes that have happened in that corridor in the past, as well as the quality of the proposed bicycle and pedestrian facility that they might be adding. And added capacity projects were also looked at for their system connectivity, and if this was going to upgrade or connect major regionally significant parts of our transportation network. Now I realize that our chat box might be covering up a bit of the screen, so I'm leaving that for a moment. Each of the projects that that were submitted can qualify for bonus points as well. And that was up to 100 extra points for serving areas of transportation equity, which were for areas with high populations of seniors and youth, as well as up to 100 points for providing matches over what is minimally required for federally funded transportation projects. So that means that if an agency like City of San Antonio put forward more than what is a 20% match, then they receive some bonus points for doing that. Okay, the next project type was operational. Again, that looked at a project's ability to address congestion. So you can see that congestion can be addressed both with addition of lanes, but it can also be addressed even without adding pavement, but maybe changing whether a road has a dedicated turn lane or improved signal timing and things like that. Operational projects were also looked at for their ability to address safety. And there was discussion, open discussion by the work group that were scoring projects about their general operational improvement. Bicycle and pedestrian projects that were standalone projects to improve bicycling and walking looked at safety. They looked at the rate of overall severe crashes on a roadway near or adjacent to the proposed bike ped improvement, as well as specifically the bike and pedestrian involved crashes on that roadway. They also looked at the quality of the proposed bicycle or pedestrian improvement. It also took into account high activity generators, meaning were these projects going to connect things like schools, multiple residential areas, transit facilities. These projects also were scored based on their system connectivity specific to the those active transportation modes, as well as the bus system. They also were looking at EJ, which is something that is ensuring that transportation improvements are also going to areas that are typically, have traditionally been underserved by transportation investments. So we looked at where minorities and low-income populations were higher, and if projects that were proposed for bicycling and pedestrian were serving or improving access in these areas. Project type, this project type also looked at usage and demand. So the existing amount of bicycling and walking trips denoted by an app tracker called Strava, as well as some counting facility data that we used from one of our partners. The transit projects looked at many different things from increasing, whether a project was going to be increasing ridership and on-time reliability, its service capacity, and the system connectivity with the existing bus network. It also looked at how the project should address minorities and low-income populations. And it finally looked at the population and employment within a quarter mile of frequent transit, which is a walkable distance, to see if it was upgrading the number of people working or living within that proposed transit improvement. This is the final project type. It was our congestion mitigation near quality program projects. And these look just at the total emissions reduction that's estimated, and that based on the cost of the project to get a benefit cost ratio. This was a funding source that's purely intended to help the Bexar County area get out of or improve its air quality. And so the projects here are looked purely on their ability to help with that. So now that you know what kinds of projects were submitted and how they are looked at by MPO staff and our interagency partners, just want to give you a few bullet points about what MPO funding involves. The agencies that are submitting funding know there's about $300 million available to programs. You remember that we got about 670 or more than that $1 million worth of projects proposed to us. So the likelihood is that less than half of that value is going to be able to be funded, which makes public input an important aspect of the project call. So these agencies must cash match 20% of their program or project construction costs, which I was alluding to earlier with those bonus points. We cannot fund projects that are on local or neighborhood streets. These federal funds are for projects that are on more of your connector and arterial roadways. An example might be San Pedro Avenue or FM 1518. Costs for these projects are reimbursable. It's not a grant program given in advance, and all federal rules apply, which means that the projects are generally coming from a city, a county, the State Department of Transportation in partnership with the city or county in order to meet those high expected costs of these types of projects. And then the projects, lastly, will be programmed over a 4 to 6 year period beginning in 2023. So we could actually see some of these projects that you're reviewing now go out for construction as soon as a couple of years out from now. And in transportation world, that's really quick. I know that it's not as quick maybe as you would hope if you live next door to one of these projects and want to see it built the next day. But it does take a lot of time to get projects ready. But these projects are pretty close to being ready, and so that's why we can see them programmed out between 2023 to 2026. And if the policy board chooses to program out a little bit later, even out to 2028. I apologize for that typo, which should be 2027 and 2028. So what do we need from you? We launched an exercise for public input on June 1st, and it goes through June 27th. It's called Your Move, meaning we've got the projects and we're looking for your move now for us to hear and understand your input. We've developed a fill-in-the-blank style story to understand your transportation vision for the future. If you were somebody who played Mad Libs growing up, which I was, this is definitely harkens back to that. So it's supposed to be and intended to be just a fun way to get you thinking about what you envision your transportation future to be. And then after filling in the blanks for that story, you have the opportunity to select your top 4 projects from among those that were submitted to us. There's information about each of the projects on a couple of different maps that I'll be demoing in just a moment. So I do want to encourage everyone, or direct you, I guess, even though we have a Q&A today, this meeting through Facebook Live or through the Webex, the best way to give your input will be through the webpage alamoareampo.org/yourmove, and that will help us record your top projects and that story that you want us to hear to understand your transportation vision. Now, at this point, I'd like to give you just a quick rundown of our webpage so that you can feel comfortable with giving your input. So I want to bring to your attention that we have the option to view the page in English or in Spanish, and we are really proud to be able to translate the entire page into Spanish this year. It was an effort, and it is hopefully something that we'll keep doing in all of our efforts. So I'm going to click on English, and right now the page is going to bring you right here to the meeting tab. But tomorrow it will go back to where it usually starts with introduction. So we've got this short and sweet little video to help convey what we're asking of you guys. and the feedback that we're seeking. There's a little bit of background information here that you might find helpful reviewing before you start the story and project input. The first is there's a fact sheet about what I've gone over tonight. We don't need to go over that again, but this project brochure and interactive map. So I've already opened the tabs up here. The project brochure is kind of a static element that we've been taking out in print when we've presented in person at meetings. And it will give you the brief project description, the construction cost, and the technical score that we went over a few slides back. You can also see the projects on a map here. So if you prefer to look at it in a static form like this, this might be your go-to information brochure. But if you wanted to look at it in an interactive online map, you have the option to do that in this tab. So feel free to pan it around, zoom in as needed. And here, as the projects are loading, you can select a project and find out more information about that. I also wanted to let you know that if you prefer a different background map, you have that option in this little corner down here. It gives a little bit more of the roadway names. So just pointing that out to help make your experience your own, as easy as it can be for you. So I'm going back now to the Your Move web page. I'm going to go to the Input tab, which is where you saw that screenshot of the transportation node lib game. You can check out instructions, but it should be pretty intuitive, so you don't have to read everything there if you don't want to. I'm going to give just a couple examples of what you could see. I've used it a few times. I think I've been a ballet dancer, have 100 million ideas. I'm going to HEB. I'm going to take VIA. At that point, you can fill out as much as you want or as little as you want. And when you create your story, it'll show you the fun little transportation story. This probably sounds pretty silly right now because you had no idea what story you were filling out. You do have the option to edit your story. That takes you to the next step. So if you keep scrolling here, you'll keep clicking through. You have the option now to edit your story. So I'm actually a transportation planner. Probably don't have 100 million ideas, but I'll still say I have 100. And so you can see that it's really easy then to update the fill in the blanks with things that are more reflective of your story and help us understand your vision. I also want to point out that we do have a section here for zip code, for age, for ethnicity, and gender. This demographic information helps us understand at the MPO if we're reaching a broad swath of people in our study area. And as an MPO, we are charged with and strive to get everybody involved in transportation planning. So we want to know if we're doing a good job with that during this input period. You do not have to fill out any of these, but it does help with our understanding of our public input process. Now, that was the storytelling portion. As you continue scrolling down to the page, you have the option to review that map. So you can still move around in right here within the page. You can see snips of that project brochure if you want to look at it that way. And down here you have the option to put in different project numbers. We say up to 4, you can put in fewer, but we're trying to help you or encourage people to prioritize their top projects. If you put in an email here, you have, you'll receive an auto-generated copy of your story and your projects. If there's anything else you want to tell us about transportation, comment, complaint, question, type it into this comment box. We'll be reading those. If there's a question, we'll get back to you. And the last thing I want to point out is a user experience thing. So notice that there's 2 scroll bars here. Be sure that you're scrolling or using your your touch on the phone within this interior one to help move you through the page. This one will take you up and down the general Your Move page. So just a point of ease of use there. So once you've submitted, you will have the opportunity to join our email list if you would like, to share your story on Facebook or Twitter or via email with other people so that you can encourage them to give input as well. That is the whole public input ask, and we hope that it is kind of fun to go through. But again, feel free to give as much or as little input as there are those blanks to fill in. All right, so we're getting to the end of the presentation, and then we'll be starting to take questions. What comes next? I know that it's really important that you understand how your input will be used. So once the input period closes, June 27th is the final day. Once we start that next week, we'll be tallying your public input and providing the results to our committees and to the Transportation Policy Board. The committees are the ones to make the initial recommendation of projects to fund, but it's the policy board that will ultimately select the projects for funding. So it's important for them to hear what the public input was. Your input is one of the considerations during project selection. Others include project technical score, agency priority, and that means if an agency submits multiple projects, but they have assigned their top project to that can be taken into account. We also consider project readiness, because as you saw, these are projects that should be beginning to be built as early as 2023. So we need projects that have had some planning, or maybe lots of planning, and lots of their coordination in terms of design, right-of-way acquisition, and other logistics on the construction side. So the projects that are selected will be added to our short-range plan, that TIP. That's under development now for the fiscal years 2023 through 26. And public input will also be used to develop the long-range transportation plan, that MTP. The transportation visions that you are submitting in those stories help inform the vision and goals and values for our long-range transportation plan. And that is being planned out today to 2050. It seems like a long time out, but as transportation planners, it's necessary to keep the community thinking about the vision that it wants to achieve in the next 25 years because of all that needs to go in to planning for, funding, and building that transportation system. So this is a timeline showing what has been developed so far in our TIP and MTP development time frame. We began this call for projects back in October. We received the projects by April 1st, and we're working through the public input phase right now, where you see that star over June 1st to 27th. Seems like we've been working toward this project call for a long time, and so we are really excited that we're getting close to the final stretch. We expect the policy board to select those projects for the MPO funding in August. And then throughout the fall and winter, we'll be continuing to develop that MTP, that long-range plan. So you can expect to have some conversations with the MPO about transportation themes that we saw arise in your stories that you shared with us. We'll have public comment, official public comment on our draft long-range, short-range plans, and what's called a conformity document for air quality needs in March of next year. And then the policy board will hear and take action on those final documents in April and May of next year. So that's what you can expect coming up. And at this point, I will look for any questions. I know I've gotten a couple through the Webex chat. So I'm going to start off with those. If you have any questions or watching on Facebook Live, please feel free to put those into the thread, and we'll be happy to answer them as well. So questions from Webex include, how much weight does public comment have on the selection process for these grants? So there isn't a specific weight granted to the public input process because it's one of those 4 themes that are considered in a discussion by the multi-agency and community member committees. The initial recommendation from those committees then goes through our policy board's executive committee and the policy board itself. And so there is some flexibility in what is ultimately decided to be funded. But public input is extremely important because when there has been great support for a project, we have seen that make a difference in the selection of the project. So feels like your input is making a difference. It's being shared for sure, and the input as well as that project readiness, that agency's priority, that technical score are being looked at together in order to make a solid recommendation for projects to fund. So another question was about the elements of this public input that actually factor into the scoring for a project selection. And so I think that's a question because we see the game, the fill-in-the-blank story, and we see the map of the projects. So we've done a dual public input ask of y'all. The story is more for our long-range plan, and the projects, picking your top or favorite projects, is for that short-range plan. And those projects that you guys put as your top projects are what will mostly be considered or what's more important for the short-range plans development and choosing the projects to fund. The story is, again, more for the long-range plan and making sure that we're having the appropriate conversations and developing the right vision and goals for our long-range plan. So we have a question from Facebook that came in. Does the MPO specifically target based on the area and growth rate? New Braunfels may be growing faster than West San Antonio, for example. So that is a really fascinating facet of transportation planning. We, as MPO, are working with new demographics or updating the demographics that go into our long-range plan. So specifically target based on area and growth rate, I interpret that as in terms of where we decide to fund projects, areas that are growing really quickly. It is part of that conversation of project selection, as well as the projects that are outlined for a long-range plan. So while we do not have the maps right now that show the demographics projected to change, so like where the number of households and where the number of employment is around the study area, we do have those, and we'll actually be presenting them at the policy board's meeting this June. So if you're really curious about seeing those numbers, that will be going to the policy board, showing current and then 2050 projections of that growth rate. And it's the whole area is just growing really fast. It is true that Comal County, Guadalupe, and Kendall counties are growing at rates more than twice their existing populations over the next 25 years. So they're seeing tremendous growth relative to their current size. Now, Bexar County, which has a really high population itself already right now, is continuing to grow too, in about, I think, the 60 or 70% rate over the next 25 years. which, given it has already a substantial, over a couple million population, it shows just the need that there is around an area like this that is growing so quickly for improvements to the transportation network. All right, there's more questions coming in. The next one is, how can we be sure that project engineers don't remove bike facilities at their discretion? That's a good question. I'm wondering if this person has specific personal experience with this. So the requirement to have bicycle and pedestrian facilities with a project that adds capacity is part of, it's a policy within the State Department of Transportation, and it's also embedded within our own MPO policies, that if a project is submitted to receive federal funding and is not going to improve those other modes, in addition to the roadway mode, that there needs to be justification for why that project wouldn't be proposing that. But the main way to ensure that those types of facilities are not removed at discretion is the description that is in the MPO's short-range plan and long-range plans. Those cannot change without an amendment process that has to be instigated by the agency that's ultimately building that project. And the removal of something like that would definitely have to go through our Technical Advisory Committee and Policy Board. It cannot be done at the whim of people working on the project. We have a question that asks, can the MPO rewrite project language to mandate specific types of bike and pedestrian facilities? That's an interesting question. And we actually, as staff working with our multi-agency partners, did work to update our technical scoring process. And the shifts that we've seen from type of preferred bike facility has definitely changed in the last decade. We've seen bike facilities used to be bike lanes that were striped along the roadway that are no longer considered maybe the type of facility you would want along that type of roadway. So we've seen a lot more types of shared use paths or protected bike facilities proposed in this project call than I've seen in any other throughout the time that I've worked at the MPO, which is about 8 years now. I think that's been a shift in the community's perception of what is a safe type of bike and pedestrian facility. That's why we have that continual planning process that we talked about. And we did incorporate the quality of bike facility in the project scoring, as you saw on the previous slides, so that projects that are more protected would receive more technical points than projects that were proposing something more traditional, like a painted bike lane. We have another question come in. It says, how does the MPO select the individuals to serve? Do they have to have a current placement on a city council? Or can they be citizens that are not currently serving on any council? So there's a couple different ways to answer that question. We do have I'm going to start with the policy board, which is our guiding board. There's 21 elected officials, elected and appointed officials there. And the agencies that have those representatives on the policy board are responsible for selecting and seating them at the policy board for the MPO. So we, AAMPO, don't choose which elected officials or department heads are seated on the policy board. That is something that the city of San Antonio has discretion of. They have 3 elected official seats and 2 appointed official seats, if I'm not incorrect. And they let us know when one of those seats needs to be changed if they're putting somebody else in. Now, on the citizens side, you do, if you're an interested citizen, have an opportunity to serve on our bicycle and or pedestrian mobility advisory committees. There are general citizen seats, as well as citizens who have a stake or a business in those transportation modes that can apply to be added or to take on one of those roles of our BMAC and our PMAC. BMAC and PMAC also have representatives that then are seated on our technical advisory committee, and that technical advisory committee advises the policy board. So I think that's pretty cool that we could potentially have a citizen who's at the BMAC or PMAC level be appointed by those committees to be the representative on the TAC as well. And I will also point out that all of our public meetings are, all of our committee and board meetings are public meetings, open to the public with the opportunity to observe or to make a comment during the citizens to be heard. So please always feel like you can attend our meetings or contact staff if you have particular questions. We are here to connect you with the answers. So if we don't have an answer or aren't the responsible agency for that roadway that you have in mind, we definitely know somebody who represents that agency and connect them with your question. Let's see, that's all the questions that have come in at this point. But I'll give it another, I'll give it a pause to see if anybody has any additional questions. There was one that we missed. Okay, so my team member Lily is transferring over the Facebook Live questions. So one that we missed is, can AAMPO rewrite project language to mandate specific types of pedestrian facilities? So that one I did address, or was attempting to address. I think it's very similar to what keeps somebody who's constructing the project and designing the project from changing out the bike or pedestrian facilities. So can we rewrite project language to mandate specific types? And it does have a different branch. I apologize. So yes, the policy board can and does set the guidance for these project calls and could be as prescriptive as saying no less than a protected type of bike facility can be submitted. So that is something that is up for consideration when we're preparing for a project call. When we were getting ready for this project call that launched back in October, one of the primary discussion items that we were having was how we could better incorporate transportation equity into project scoring and project selection. And so being able to award bonus points to all types of projects for considering how they're addressing the traditionally underserved groups, as well as incorporate that into the core technical scores of our bicycle, pedestrian, and transit projects was, it was a big step for the MPO and something that the board did unanimously approve, which was great to see. So how do we know what types of bike facilities are being considered? The project descriptions should include the type so that you have that information when you're reviewing. So look to see in those bike facilities if it's a bike lane, which will be something that's a striped bike lane on the pavement, or if it says protected, that will be something that actually has a raised buffer or like a raised concrete median between the traffic lane and a bike facility. as well as a shared use path. So if it wasn't a bike lane, a protected bike lane, it might be a cycle track or a shared use path. The cycle track is completely separated from the roadway but runs alongside of it with a protected side. And shared use path is like a large sidewalk, so up off the roadway, can be used by cyclists and people walking. So if you have any questions about a particular project that you don't think was in detail enough, let us know. Email myself, Sarah Blazowski at alamoareaMPO.org, and I will make sure that we update that information and also convey it to you so you have that in your review. In your public comment form, we can only rate projects positively. How can we express disapproval of certain projects? If you would like to do that, please put that in the comment section. So if you think something wouldn't be worth funding, include that there, and those comments are also going to be conveyed. Are transit projects requests for capital projects or operational costs? So we have a mix of both. There are a couple of transit requests that came in to create an express route from the far west side of San Antonio, Alamo Ranch, into downtown, and a second one from downtown over to the east side. Those are considered more operational because they're increasing how fast transit buses are arriving, but they're not actually changing what the roadway looks like or building new transit centers. But we also have a request from VIA to upgrade or phase out, I guess, some of their older buses that use diesel fuel to newer, cleaner CNG, compressed natural gas buses. And so that's a capital project because it's dealing with the actual bus itself. Okay, great. I'm so glad to see so many questions from y'all coming in. I'm going to keep pausing in case anybody wants to submit yet others. Okay. So I'm guessing that we might have gotten through most of your questions, but if anything occurs to you afterward or as you're reviewing the projects to prepare for giving your input, anything comes up, we are here. You can reach us on Facebook, you can reach us by email and phone, and just continue to reach out with us. Even when the public input window closes, we're still here to help you answer your transportation questions. A question comes in about how we can view the recording of this video. We will have that up tomorrow on the Your Move webpage. So again, that's alamoareampo.org/yourmove. The recording is still going, and we'll have that uploaded by tomorrow on that page where it said public meeting and more information. You can rewatch it or you can share it with your friends. On Facebook too, you can actually find our previously live, now recorded videos. So you will have that option too. All right. So I'll hang out a little bit more to see if anything comes in to the chat box. But at this point, I'm going to end the recording and stop sharing our screen. That will conclude tonight's meeting. again, public input is taken through June 27th. So thank you so much for your time spent on Facebook Live or here with us on the Webex to hear more about this update of our tips and our long-range plan.